The dining room went quiet for exactly 1 second after my stepmother said it. Not shocked quiet, not uncomfortable quiet, just waiting to see if I would obey. "Take your grandmother and eat in the kitchen," Diane said, smoothing the front of her red Christmas dress like she had just corrected a seating mistake. "There isn't room for you two at the table tonight." The chandelier light reflected off crystal glasses. 12 place settings, 12 chairs, 2 empty seats. I noticed that before anyone else spoke. My fork hovered over the serving tray I had just carried in. I said carefully, "There are literally 2 open chairs." My stepsister Megan laughed first. Not loudly, just enough for people to hear permission. "Well," she said, sipping wine, "garbage should go where it belongs." A few guests chuckled. Someone avoided eye contact. My father stared at his plate, and that hurt more than anything. I felt heat rush into my face. My hands started shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "Dad," I asked quietly. He didn't look up. Diane turned toward me, smile tight, eyes cold. "Don't ruin Christmas, Emily," I swallowed. "I helped cook all day. Grandma made half this food. We're family." The slap came fast. Clean, practiced, gasps, then silence again. My cheek burned so sharply it felt unreal, like someone else had been hit. Diane leaned closer, voice low enough that only I heard. "You embarrass me in front of my guests again," she whispered, "and you won't step foot in this house after tonight." Behind me, Grandma Rose gently took my wrist. Her hands were thin, warm, steady. "Come on," she said softly. No anger, no protest. She simply guided me toward the kitchen. And as the door closed behind us, laughter resumed in the dining room. Plates clinked. Wine poured. Christmas music played louder, like we had never existed. I remember thinking one strange thing in that moment. Grandma wasn't surprised. Grandma didn't cry. She didn't complain. She didn't even sigh. She sat at the small kitchen table, folded her napkin neatly, and began serving us food like this was exactly where she expected to be. That unsettled me more than the humiliation, because my grandmother was not a quiet woman. She had survived cancer twice, raised 3 children alone after my grandfather died, argued with bank managers, doctors, and once a city council member over a parking ticket. But tonight, she said nothing, not when they laughed, not when I was slapped, not even when Megan walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later just to grab more wine and muttered, "Try not to touch anything." Grandma only smiled politely, and after Megan left, she reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope, looked at it for a long time, then slid it back inside. That was the moment I knew something was wrong, because written on the front was my father's name. And Grandma whispered, almost to herself, "Tomorrow will be different." I didn't understand what she meant, but later, I would realize Christmas dinner had never really been about us sitting at the table. It had been about timing. Before I keep going, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? I always wonder who's sitting with me when I tell these stories. Different cities, different countries, different kitchens where maybe someone else has felt invisible at a family table. And if stories like this resonate with you, you can subscribe. Not because of me, but because sometimes hearing someone else say, "This happened to me too," makes things feel less lonely. Okay, let me take you back a little. Because what happened that Christmas morning didn't start with a slap. It started years earlier when Diane entered our family. My name is Emily. I was 29 that Christmas. I lived 15 minutes away from my father's house, but emotionally, it felt like another country. After my mom died when I was 17, my father changed fast. Grief hollowed him out, and into that empty space walked Diane. She was organized, efficient, impressive. People loved her instantly. She worked in corporate event management and treated life like a schedule that needed correcting. Within a year, the house looked different. The furniture changed. My mother's photos disappeared slowly, not removed all at once, just rotated out. Replaced. Diane never yelled, "That's important." She didn't need to. Control came through small adjustments. "Emily, maybe don't wear that. It sends the wrong message. Emily, adults don't interrupt conversations. Emily, your grandmother means well, but she complicates things." Always polite, always reasonable, always positioning herself as the calm solution. At first, I believed her. My father definitely did. He looked relieved whenever Diane handled something emotional. He stopped making decisions, stopped disagreeing, stopped noticing. Grandma Rose noticed, though. She would squeeze my hand during visits and whisper, "Watch people who smile while moving you out of your own life." I thought she was being dramatic. Back then, Diane included us. Holiday dinners, family photos, birthday brunches. But over time, invitations shifted. "Small dinner tonight, Emily. Work clients coming over. Maybe Grandma should rest instead." It happened gradually enough that you questioned your own memory. Was I excluded or just busy? Then Megan moved in. Diane's daughter from a previous marriage. 24. Influencer energy, always filming something. She immediately claimed the house as if she had grown up there. "Dad finally has a real family," she joked once while live streaming. I laughed awkwardly, assuming she meant it playfully. She didn't. The first real crack came during Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. We arrived and found place cards at the table. Everyone had one, except Grandma and me. Diane smiled sweetly. "Oh, we thought you'd be more comfortable on the couch, less formal." Grandma raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That night on the drive home, she told me quietly, "She's rearranging hierarchy." I didn't fully understand, until Christmas Eve arrived this time. Diane personally invited us, insisted we come early to help cook, hugged Grandma at the door, called us family repeatedly. And all day, everything felt unusually warm. Too warm. Now I realized something else. She wanted witnesses. Around noon, while we were cooking, Diane kept checking her phone. Not work emails, messages. She'd step into the hallway, lower her voice, then come back overly cheerful. "Tonight is important," she kept saying. "To new beginnings." I remember stirring gravy and asking, "What new beginnings?" She smiled without answering. Megan filmed clips of the decorations. "Perfect Christmas aesthetic," she said to her followers. "Family, success, gratitude." She never filmed Grandma or me. At one point, Grandma reached for a serving bowl Megan had set aside. Megan quickly moved it away. "Oh, that's for the main table." The phrasing stuck with me, main table, as if there were ranks. Later, I overheard Diane whisper to my father near the pantry, "After tonight, everything will finally be settled." He sounded nervous. "Are you sure this is the right way?" She replied softly, almost soothing. "It's already done." I remember feeling uneasy but brushing it off. Families are complicated, I told myself. Maybe I was sensitive, maybe grief still lingered, but Grandma watched everything, every movement, every conversation, every time Diane repositioned us physically or socially. And once, when Diane stepped outside to take a call, Grandma leaned toward me and said quietly, "Do you trust her?" I hesitated too long. Grandma nodded like she already had her answer. Guests arrived around 6. Neighbors. Business associates. 2 couples I didn't recognize. Diane transformed instantly into hostess perfection, laughing, touching shoulders, refilling glasses. She introduced me not as her stepdaughter, but as, "Emily, she's staying nearby right now." Like I was temporary. Grandma became Rose, an old relative. Not mother-in-law, not family, just background. I noticed people glancing at us with mild confusion, as if trying to understand our place in the room. I felt myself shrinking. Then came another strange moment. Diane gathered everyone in the living room before dinner. "I want tonight to celebrate transitions," she announced. My father looked pale. Megan clapped enthusiastically. I caught Grandma watching Diane with a calm expression I had never seen before. Not hurt, not angry, prepared. And then dinner began, and you already know how that ended, with us in the kitchen, separated, removed, publicly downgraded. But here's what I didn't know yet. While we sat at that small kitchen table eating reheated turkey, Diane believed she had already won, because she thought the letter in Grandma's purse would never be opened. Around midnight, after the guests left and the house finally went quiet, Grandma handed me the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly for the first time that night. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "your father is going to read this." I looked at the sealed paper. "What is it?" Grandma met my eyes, and for the first time since the slap, she smiled. "A truth they buried 30 years ago." I didn't sleep that night, because I had no idea that by sunrise, our family wouldn't exist anymore. I barely slept, Not because of the slap, not even because of the humiliation. It was Grandma. She moved through the house that night like someone finishing unfinished business. After the guests left, Diane didn't acknowledge us. She kissed my father on the cheek, laughed about how perfect the evening had been, and disappeared upstairs with Megan, still discussing leftovers and social media posts. No apology, no explanation, no eye contact. Grandma and I cleaned the kitchen alone. The sink water ran warm over my hands while Christmas music played faintly from the living room speaker Diane forgot to turn off. "Grandma," I finally said, "why didn't you say anything?" She dried a plate slowly. "I've said things before," she replied calmly. "It never mattered." That answer sat heavily in my chest. I watched her fold dish towels neatly, too neatly, like ritual, like closure. I thought she knew tonight would happen. I lowered my voice. "You expected this, didn't you?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she walked to her purse, opened it, and placed the envelope on the counter between us. White paper, old-fashioned handwriting. My father's name written carefully across the front, Daniel Harper. I reached for it instinctively. Grandma's hand gently stopped mine. "Not yet." Her voice wasn't emotional, it was decisive. "This must be read when everyone is present." A chill moved through me. "Why?" She met my eyes. "Because some truths only work when witnesses exist." "Grandma, what is in that letter?" She smiled faintly. "Freedom. For who?" "For whoever is strong enough to accept it." I swallowed. "Are we in trouble?" She shook her head slowly. "No, Emily, trouble has already happened. This is correction." I stared at her. "You're scaring me." She squeezed my hand. "I know." Then she added quietly, "Tomorrow, your father will finally understand who he married." I lay awake on the pull-out couch that night listening to footsteps upstairs. Doors opening, soft conversations behind walls. At one point I heard Deanne laughing, relaxed, victorious. And that unsettled me more than anything, because Grandma slept peacefully beside me, like someone who had already finished fighting. Christmas morning sunlight filled the kitchen. Grandma was already dressed. Pearl earrings, blue sweater, hair perfectly done, not holiday casual, formal, intentional. She poured coffee calmly. My father walked in first around 8, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He froze when he saw both of us already sitting at the table. "Oh," he said awkwardly, "you're up early." Grandma gestured toward the chair. "Sit, Daniel." Her tone carried authority I hadn't heard in years. He obeyed automatically. That alone surprised me. Diane entered seconds later, wrapped in a silk robe, smiling until she noticed the tension. "What's going on?" she asked. Megan followed, phone already in hand. "Is this like a family moment? Should I record?" "No," Grandma said firmly. Megan lowered the phone, annoyed. Grandma slid the envelope across the table. "For you, Daniel." He looked confused. "What is this?" "A letter I should have given you 30 years ago." The room changed. Something invisible shifted. Diane's posture stiffened. "Rose," she said lightly, "maybe this isn't the time." Grandma didn't look at her. "It is exactly the time." Dad picked up the envelope slowly. "You're making me nervous." "You should read it," Grandma replied. Diane stepped closer. "Daniel, we have plans this morning." "Let him read," Grandma said calmly. Megan crossed her arms. "This feels dramatic." Grandma turned toward her gently. "Truth often does." Dad frowned. "What is this about?" Grandma answered softly. "Your marriage." Silence, absolute silence. He opened the envelope. I watched my father read. At first his expression showed mild curiosity, then confusion, then disbelief, then something deeper. His hands began trembling. "Mom," he whispered. Diane stepped forward quickly. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He kept reading. I noticed pages, multiple pages, legal copies attached, old documents, signatures, dates, and suddenly Dad looked at Diane, not lovingly, not defensively, suspiciously. "What is this?" he asked. Her smile faltered. "I don't know what she's trying to do." Grandma folded her hands calmly. "Finish reading." I felt my stomach tighten. Because for the first time since Diane entered our lives, she looked uncertain, and Grandma looked powerful. Dad read aloud without meaning to. "This says the house. Mom, this says the house was never transferred to me." Diane's voice sharpened. "That's ridiculous." He continued reading. It says ownership remained in a family trust managed by you. He looked up at Grandma. You own the house. Grandma nodded once. Yes. The heir left the room. Diane laughed nervously. That's paperwork technicalities. Daniel, we fixed that years ago. Grandma slid another document forward. Did we? Dad scanned it, his face drained of color. It says Diane filed to transfer ownership 6 months ago. He turned toward his wife slowly. Without telling me, Diane crossed her arms, I was protecting us. From what? Dad asked. From instability, from outside influence. Grandma spoke quietly. From me. Megan stepped forward defensively. Okay, this is getting weird. Mom doesn't need permission to handle finances. Dad's voice rose slightly. She forged authorization. The word hung heavy. Forged. Diane's calm cracked. That's not true. Grandma opened her purse again and removed another folder. Bank statements, legal notices, correspondence, 30 years of records. I kept copies, she said. Grandma began speaking not emotionally, just factually. When your father died, Daniel, the house was placed into trust to protect you and Emily. Dad blinked. You told me it was mine. Grandma nodded gently. It was always meant to become yours when you were ready. She looked toward Diane. But some people prefer control before honesty. Diane's voice hardened. This is manipulation. Grandma ignored her. Over the years, small financial decisions were made without your knowledge. Dad flipped through papers faster now. Loan applications, refinancing requests, withdrawals. His breathing changed. You told me we were struggling because of taxes. Diane said nothing. You said we needed to cut expenses, stop helping Emily, stop supporting Mom. Still silence. And then realization landed fully. The isolation, the exclusions, the hierarchy. It hadn't been emotional preference. It had been strategy. Grandma turned to me. Emily, do you remember when Diane insisted you move out after college? I nodded slowly. She said it would help me grow. Grandma looked at Dad. It removed the last person who questioned financial decisions. Dad stared at Diane. You pushed my daughter out. Diane's voice rose. She was dependent. I finally spoke. I was paying rent. He looked shocked. You were, I nodded, to Diane direct transfers. Grandma placed printed bank statements on the table, proof, every payment, every transfer, every hidden account. The room felt smaller. The power balance was changing in real time, and Diane realized it too. Grandma spoke again. I waited to deliver this letter until witnesses were present. Dad looked confused. Why? She answered calmly. Because Diane planned to finalize ownership transfer after tonight's dinner. Diane snapped. That's a lie. Grandma slid one final paper forward. Scheduled appointment, December 26. Property reassignment. Beneficiary, Megan. My stepsister froze. Mom, Diane turned toward her sharply. Don't. Dad stood up slowly. You were transferring the house to Megan. Silence confirmed everything. You told me this was our home, Dad said. It is, Diane replied quickly. You cut out my mother, my daughter. I protected our future. By humiliating them last night, that was social positioning. The phrase echoed horribly. Social positioning. Grandma closed her eyes briefly, as if hearing confirmation she had expected. My father sat down again. Different man, shoulders squared, voice steady. Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier, Mom? Grandma looked at him gently. Because you wouldn't have believed me. He didn't deny it. That silence hurt more than anger. He turned toward me. I'm sorry. I felt emotion rise but stayed calm. Something inside me had shifted too. For the first time, I wasn't asking for acceptance. I was witnessing truth. And Diane understood she was losing control. Her tone softened instantly. Daniel, we can fix this. Families argue. Your mother is confused. Grandma met her gaze calmly. No, I was patient. Then Grandma said the sentence that changed everything again. There is one more page you haven't read. Dad flipped to the final sheet. His eyes widened. He looked at Diane like he no longer recognized her. What is this lawsuit? Diane went pale. Grandma folded her hands. The part where she tried to legally declare me mentally unfit. The room fell into stunned silence. And I realized last night's humiliation wasn't random. It had been preparation. They weren't just pushing us out of the dining room. They were preparing to erase us completely. No one spoke for almost 20 seconds after Grandma revealed the lawsuit. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt like oxygen had been removed from the room. My father stared at the document again. "You tried to have my mother declared mentally unfit." Diane didn't answer immediately. She inhaled slowly, recalibrating, the same way she used to reset conversations when she lost control at dinner parties. Then she smiled. That terrified me more than anger would have. "Daniel," she said gently, "you're misunderstanding legal language." Grandma folded her hands calmly. "I never misunderstand paperwork." Megan stepped forward, already defensive. "This is insane. Grandma, sorry, Rose, you're literally attacking my mom on Christmas morning." Grandma didn't react to the correction of her title. Dad looked between them. "Diane, why was there an evaluation request?" Diane's voice softened into wounded patience. "Because your mother has been confused for years." She turned toward me. "And Emily encourages it." My stomach dropped. Here it was, the pivot. The moment she moved from defense to attack, Diane sighed dramatically. "You don't see what I deal with every day, Daniel." "What do you mean?" he asked. "She forgets conversations. She accuses people. She hoards documents." Grandma raised an eyebrow. "I archive evidence." Megan scoffed. "That's exactly what unstable people say." I felt anger rise. "That's not fair." Diane's eyes snapped toward me. "No one asked you." The tone wasn't loud, but it carried threat. Then she added calmly, "You've always been emotionally reactive, Emily. That's why we worried about leaving finances near you too." My father frowned. "What does Emily have to do with this?" Diane answered instantly. "She influences your mother." I realized something cold in that moment. She wasn't defending herself. She was rebuilding a narrative, one where we were the problem. Diane walked to the counter and poured coffee calmly. Her hands didn't shake. "You know," she said casually, "last night's seating situation actually proved my concern." Dad looked confused. "What seating situation?" Megan laughed lightly. "They couldn't handle sitting separately for one evening." I felt heat rise again. "You told us there was no room." Diane tilted her head. "No, Emily. I suggested a quieter space because Grandma gets overwhelmed socially." Grandma looked amused. "I hosted political fundraisers for 20 years. Megan shrugged. "People decline mentally in different ways." The cruelty landed softly, disguised as concern. My father hesitated, and that hesitation hurt, because for one second he considered it. I realized Diane wasn't trying to win an argument. She was trying to rewrite reality faster than truth could catch up, and she had practiced this for years. Diane suddenly stood. "Daniel, could you help me upstairs for a moment?" He followed reluctantly. The second they disappeared, Megan turned toward us. Her smile vanished instantly. "You really screwed up," Megan said quietly. I crossed my arms. "We didn't do anything." She leaned against the counter. "You think exposing paperwork changes anything?" Grandma sipped her coffee calmly. "Truth changes many things." Megan laughed. "You two have no idea how vulnerable you actually are." I felt my stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" She stepped closer. "My mom runs half this town socially. You know that, right?" No response. She continued. One conversation, and suddenly Emily's job references disappear. My pulse spiked. One rumor and assisted living facilities start asking questions about Grandma's behavior. Grandma's eyes narrowed slightly. "You would fabricate concern," Megan shrugged. "It wouldn't even feel like lying." I said sharply, "You're threatening us." She smiled. "I'm explaining consequences." Then she lowered her voice. "Walk away today, pretend this never happened, or things get uncomfortable." For the first time, I understood. Last night's humiliation wasn't emotional cruelty. It was conditioning. They expected obedience. Diane returned downstairs carrying fresh mugs. "Let's reset," she said warmly. Her composure was flawless again. She handed Grandma a cup, then one to me. "Peace offering." I hesitated. Grandma accepted hers politely. Something felt wrong, not dramatic, just off. Diane watched us carefully, too carefully. I lifted the mug but didn't drink yet. Grandma took a small sip, then paused. Her expression didn't change, but she set the cup down slowly. Diane smiled. Too hot, Grandma replied gently. Yes. I think I'll wait. Minutes passed. Conversation resumed awkwardly. Then Grandma leaned toward me and whispered, Switch cups with me. My heart skipped. Why? She didn't answer. Just nudged her cup toward mine. I obeyed. I took a tiny sip. The taste was bitter, not coffee bitter, chemical bitter. I stopped immediately. Is something wrong? Diane asked instantly. I forced a smile. No, just strong. She watched me swallow, waiting, monitoring. Grandma suddenly spoke loudly. Daniel, could you smell this? He took the cup. It smells fine. Grandma nodded calmly. Yes, perhaps I'm imagining things. Diane's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Megan rolled her eyes. Oh my God, now we're accusing Mom of poisoning people. No one had said the word, except her. The room froze. I couldn't prove anything. Maybe it was nothing. But the way Diane watched whether we drank, the way Megan reacted before accusations existed, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just financial manipulation anymore. It felt desperate. Diane stood abruptly. This is getting unhealthy. She looked at my father. I think Emily and Rose should leave for today. My chest tightened. Dad hesitated. They just got here, Diane's voice lowered, and they're upsetting everyone. Grandma replied calmly, We will leave when we choose. Diane's smile disappeared completely now. You are guests in this house. Grandma met her eyes. No, I am the owner. Silence. That landed hard. Diane stepped closer to Grandma. You think paperwork gives you power? Grandma answered quietly. No, patience does. Diane leaned down slightly, voice cold. You should have stayed quiet. Grandma's response was soft enough that only nearby people heard. I did, for 30 years. Diane suddenly grabbed her phone. She opened a group chat, sent messages rapidly. Within minutes, 2 neighbors arrived unexpectedly under the excuse of exchanging gifts. I realized what she was doing, rebuilding witnesses, controlling narrative again. She greeted them loudly. I'm so sorry you're walking into family drama. Then she laughed lightly. You know how elderly paranoia can be. The humiliation hit differently this time, calculated, strategic. She wanted outsiders to see us as unstable. Neighbor Linda looked uncomfortable. Oh, everything okay? Diane sighed dramatically. Rose believes I'm stealing the house. Linda laughed nervously. Oh my, Megan added, and Emily is encouraging legal threats. I spoke carefully. That isn't what's happening. Diane shook her head sadly. This is exactly what doctors warned about. Grandma turned toward Linda calmly. Would you like to see the legal documents? Linda hesitated. Diane cut in quickly. That's unnecessary. Grandma replied. Truth is never unnecessary. The tension thickened. For the first time, Diane lost control of the room's emotional direction. My father finally spoke louder than anyone else. Enough! Everyone stopped. He looked exhausted. Diane, did you file legal paperwork against my mother? Long pause. Her answer came carefully. I was protecting you. Not denial. Confirmation disguised as justification. He sat down heavily. I saw something breaking inside him. I realized revenge wasn't coming quickly, because Diane wasn't collapsing. She was escalating, and dangerous people don't surrender when exposed. They tighten control. As guests lingered awkwardly, Diane pulled me aside near the hallway. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You should convince your grandmother to stop. I didn't respond. She continued. You don't understand what happens if this goes public. What happens? I asked. Her eyes hardened. You lose everything connected to this family. I felt strangely calm. We already did. She leaned closer. You have no idea how far I will go. Behind us, Megan added quietly, and accidents happen more often than people think. The words were soft, almost casual, but unmistakable. Threat. That was the moment fear turned into certainty. We weren't just unwanted. We were obstacles. Grandma suddenly stood in the living room and spoke clearly enough for everyone present to hear. Daniel, she said, there is one final document you haven't opened. She placed a sealed folder on the coffee table. Thicker than the letter, official, stamped. My father opened it slowly. His eyes widened immediately. He looked at Diane, not confused anymore, horrified. What is this criminal complaint? Diane went completely still. Grandma's voice remained calm. "The part where the truth leaves this house." And that's when I realized the real exposure hadn't even started yet. My father didn't sit down when he opened the folder. He stayed standing, like his body already understood something irreversible had begun. The paper inside trembled slightly in his hands. I watched his eyes move line by line, then stop, then go back. He swallowed hard. "What criminal complaint?" he asked quietly. No one answered immediately. The room felt heavier than it had all morning. Even the neighbors Diane had pulled into the situation stopped pretending this was normal family tension. Grandma spoke gently. "It documents financial fraud, coercive control, and attempted unlawful transfer of trust property." Diane laughed, too loudly. "Oh my God, Rose, you actually filed something. This is ridiculous." Grandma didn't raise her voice. "I didn't file it alone." Dad looked up sharply. "With who?" Grandma turned toward the hallway. "Come in, please." Two people stepped through the front door, a woman in a gray suit, and a middle-aged man holding a leather briefcase. I recognized neither of them. Diane did. Her face lost color instantly. "Daniel Harper?" the woman asked calmly. "Yes, I'm attorney Melissa Grant. We spoke last week." Dad frowned. "No, we didn't." She nodded gently. "You didn't, your mother did." The man beside her added, "I'm an investigator retained by the trust." Diane's voice sharpened. "You cannot just walk into my house." The investigator replied evenly. "Technically, ma'am, it isn't yours." Silence detonated across the room. Megan whispered, "Mom, what is happening?" Diane ignored her. She turned toward my father quickly, voice urgent. "This is harassment. Call the police." The attorney spoke before he could move. "We already notified them as a precaution." That was the first moment Diane looked afraid. For years, Diane controlled environments, guest lists, conversations, perception. Now strangers stood calmly inside her perfectly curated Christmas morning. Witnesses she didn't choose. Narrative she couldn't manage. The investigator placed documents on the coffee table. "These are bank tracing summaries covering the last 8 years." Dad sat slowly. He flipped through pages, numbers, accounts, transfers, withdrawals. My name appeared repeatedly. Grandma's name, too. Diane stepped forward quickly. "This is private financial information." The attorney answered calmly. "It became criminal when signatures were falsified." Megan shook her head. "No, my mom would never." The investigator slid forward a highlighted page. "Digital authorization logs show repeated access from Mrs. Harper's personal device." Megan's voice faltered. "Mom!" Diane's composure fractured. "You're twisting data," Diane snapped. Attorney Grant remained calm. "We verified with the bank. You manipulated them. 3 separate institutions confirmed." Dad's voice came out strained. "Diane, did you move money from Mom's trust?" She turned to him desperately. "I am just protective about our future. You know we need that. That's not an answer." Dad said. "You never handled finances. Someone had to," she shouted. "So you lied?" he questioned. "I adjusted things. Your mom is old and has amnesia. Did you forge my signature?" Another question. Silence. The answer lived in that silence. "Let's not make it a bigger issue, okay?" she said calmly. Everyone present understood. Last night's humiliation suddenly looked different. Not social preference, not personality conflict, preparation. She had been pushing us out before removing us legally. Diane's eyes moved toward me and Grandma, cold again. Calculating, she lowered her voice just enough that only we heard. "You think this ends well for you?" I felt my pulse spike. Grandma didn't move. Diane continued quietly. "Cases like this drag for years. People lose jobs. Reputations disappear." Megan joined her, whispering harshly, "You've already embarrassed yourselves enough. Stop before things get ugly." Grandma answered calmly, "They already were ugly." I realized something then. The threats weren't about winning anymore. They were about fear, because exposure had begun. Attorney Grant turned toward my father. "There is also contextual evidence." She nodded toward the investigator. He connected a tablet to the television. A video appeared. Last night's Christmas dinner, recorded from the corner of the dining room. My breath caught. Megan gasped. "You filmed us?" The investigator replied. "No. The home security system did." Diane froze. Dad stared at the screen. There we were. Grandma and I carrying food, standing beside empty chairs. Diane's voice echoed clearly. There isn't room for you two at the table tonight. Megan's laughter followed. Garbage should go where it belongs. The slap replayed. Loud, undeniable. The room went silent. Neighbor Linda covered her mouth. Oh my God, Dad looked physically ill. You hit my daughter. Diane tried to recover. It was a misunderstanding. The investigator paused the video. Time-stamped 32 seconds before Mrs. Harper sent a message confirming legal appointment regarding property reassignment. The implications settled heavily. Humiliation wasn't emotional. It was strategic isolation before financial removal. People in the room began reprocessing everything. Linda whispered, I thought Emily stopped visiting because she wanted distance. Another guest added quietly, Diane always said Rose was forgetful. Reality rearranged itself. Every past story Diane told began collapsing. Dad spoke slowly. You made me believe they were the problem. No one defended Diane now, not even Megan. I trusted you, Dad said. Diane's voice softened desperately. I built this family. No, he replied quietly. You controlled it. I loved you. You isolated everyone who loved me first. Her composure shattered. You were weak, Daniel. Someone had to lead. The room recoiled at the raw honesty. Grandma simply watched, patient, finished fighting. A knock sounded at the door. 2 officers stepped inside, professional. Calm, Attorney Grant greeted them. This is the documentation referenced in our report. Diane stepped backward. This is insane. You can't arrest someone over paperwork. One officer spoke evenly. No one is being arrested right now. We're documenting statements. But the symbolic shift was undeniable. Authority no longer belonged to Diane. Neighbors watched. Guests whispered. Megan's phone buzzed repeatedly, messages spreading quickly through their social circle. Her influencer composure cracked. Mom, people are already texting me. Diane looked around the room. No allies left. Only witnesses. The same kind she had carefully curated the night before. Except now, they weren't laughing. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt something quieter. Relief. Like years of invisible pressure lifting slowly. Grandma squeezed my hand. This was never about revenge, she murmured. It was about ending fear. Statements were taken. Documents collected. The attorney explained next legal steps calmly. Diane sat silently on the couch, staring ahead. Megan avoided everyone's eyes. My father approached Grandma. His voice broke. I should have listened. Grandma smiled gently. You needed to see. He turned to me. I failed you, I answered honestly. You didn't see what was happening. He nodded, tears forming. I see now. That mattered more than apology. The house feels different now. Quieter, lighter. Legal proceedings continued for months, but ownership of the home was restored fully under the original trust. Diane moved out within weeks. Megan followed shortly after. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. Grandma and I redesigned the kitchen together. New curtains, fresh paint. We moved the small kitchen table into the dining room, right beneath the chandelier, where we now eat every Sunday. My father cooks sometimes. He asks Grandma for recipes. He listens more. Not perfectly, but honestly. I moved back nearby, not out of dependence but choice. For the first time since my mother died. Home feels real again. I still think about that Christmas dinner sometimes. About sitting in the kitchen, while laughter came from another room. Back then, I thought humiliation meant weakness. Now I understand something different. Silence can be preparation. Patience can be power. And truth doesn't rush. It waits until it cannot be ignored. Grandma once told me, people reveal who they are when they believe no consequences exist. That Christmas, consequences finally arrived. Not through anger. Not through revenge. Just through truth being spoken where everyone could hear it. And strangely, peace followed. I want to ask you something. If you had been in my place, after everything that happened, would you have forgiven Diane? Or once someone crosses that line, is trust gone forever? And tell me honestly, who do you think was really wrong here? I read your thoughts